you know, what would work to change that narrative? What would be what would trigger, you know, like better commitment and financial investment in that? Also, you know, communicating better the evidence around breastfeeding. So it's a movement that just started, like at the beginning of the year. I have a couple of copies of the strategy that we developed around that. And so it's work in progress. Yeah, that you know, we'd be happy to share, you know, like the strategy, as I said, and the activities that will come around that this year and in the next couple of years.
Hi. Oh, there we go. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm Alison Bernie. I'm with the Micronutrient Initiative in the Research Evaluation Unit. Erin, I just wanted to ask you a quick question about the weekly iron supplements. So, using school as a platform is such a great idea, but there must have been a task shifting from the health centers and the nurses to the schools and the teachers. I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on how that occurred and if parents were maybe a little bit more concerned about a teacher providing the weekly iron fully, or how they felt from it going from the health center to the school.
I think that's a really good comment around kind of the role of teachers. Unfortunately, for the situation with iron folic acid supplements, it's happening a lot for pregnant women in many countries. It's part of routine delivery, not always to the level it should be. But with weekly iron folic acids, despite many countries having policies and guidelines, many don't. And in India beforehand, this wasn't even happening. So it wasn't like it was shifted from the health centers to the schools. It really just wasn't an existing platform at all. The coverage would be next to zero when this happened. So in the case of weekly iron folic acid supplementation, it was a new program. They wanted to implement it, and the schools were the best channel to reach the most girls. The out-of-school girls are still a challenge for that group, but the biggest shift that had to take place wasn't really around giving out the supplements. It was around the logistics and the supply and managing it and procuring all these supplements, because that strength really relies, and that's in the health system. So now the schools are managing a health commodity, and that was very new for them. So the biggest role for the health system was really supporting the schools in monitoring consumption, forecasting supplements, and what was needed. And that's where the kind of the biggest capacity transfer was kind of done with a collaboration between the schools and the health system. But that was something that was managed quite well in Chhattisgarh, and I think for other areas looking at similar programs, it would be essential to involve that health system in supporting the schools in delivering a nutrition intervention.
I just want to follow up on that point you made, because I think it's a good consideration, and I wonder if you have any information on some of the other countries that have tried this at the national level. Like, for example, Malawi has had funding from World Bank, and I've just kind of lost the follow through on that. But they did a program for school-age adolescent girls, one of the countries weekly iron supplementation, based on some work that Lotus had done previously that showed a significant impact, right? And so they scaled that. Not everybody. I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot. I just wonder, but it's a good example of where the skill has been naturally money for the time. Maybe there's other countries too that try this and act on
I think, Carolyn, a lot of what's informed the current evidence around IFA supplementation has been work at the time it was done, which was 2008, and then again in 2011. There were about 6 or 7 trials reviewed. Most of those were in the Asia region, and they ranged in small scale up to national coverage. There was one project in Egypt that covered both adolescent girls and boys, and that was school delivery platforms as well. The Malawi example at that time wasn't included, but I think, and I don't know the Malawi example specifically, but I think there is guidance within the WHO documents. But I think there's a really nice write-up of those countries that have looked at iron folic acid supplements, weekly supplements. But even thinking beyond schools, some of the other Asia examples that I think is an interesting platform to consider where the context is right was in workplace settings. They got factory workers where some of the population was adolescents, and also women of reproductive age who were not pregnant. They had weekly supplements for them, and it was really done by engaging the employers, the supervisors, and the companies, saying, you know, this is a valuable thing to value employee health, increase productivity. So that was, when you look at a lot of the examples, and unfortunately there are not many for weekly iron folic acid supplements. You see a lot in Asia, and they're primarily between school programs and a few factory workplace setting ones. I've seen very little delivered effectively through the health system, with the exception of Vietnam, but their outreach is not something you would find in every country, just their infrastructure.
Just also, I mean, reaching out of school girls, and you mentioned India, and there's a few states, in fact, now that they have this program to reach out, you know, for the out of school girls through youth clubs and also sport groups. But it's not just about nutrition; it's also hygiene related, and you know, and try to get the girls back in school, because we know that it has really an impact on their nutrition, but also on delaying the first pregnancy as well.
And maybe to add to that discussion, I was involved with the United program in Cambodia, where we introduced it into garment factories and school and communities in the remote areas. And I think you covered this very well, but another aspect to think about in introducing this to other countries is the sale of weekly unemployment to this target population. We didn't sell it in the garment factories because it wasn't against the law. But when we evaluated the program, we did sell it in the community to the remote areas, and we did sell it through schools to the wider community. And in all areas at the end, all the women said, please continue to sell it. By selling it, we could pack it, we could market it, we could do social marketing, and we wanted a very captive product. It's very different to the daily iron folate through pregnancy. And also, as I said, by selling it, we can get access to it. And we're not relying on the health system. So it was a big lesson in that program, but very much consistent with all the time we experienced.
You raise an interesting question or point related to the channels for reaching communities. And many of us think of public sector programming and delivery modalities. Here you're describing the market-based approach. And certainly one of the characteristics of international sport is the strong prominence of the private sector through sponsorship and their own branding related to sports events and to teams. This is, I guess, for all three of you. Based on your various presentations, the experiences that you've had, do you see a role for private sector being a link between all the themes that you've described on the nutrition side, as well as their very active participation in support of sport? And if so, how?
I can just comment from the adolescent nutrition side. I think there's a lot to learn from the private sector. They're reaching these girls with marketing, you know, products and things that we need to learn from. I mean, health sector-wise, we don't have the right messages for adolescent girls. Maybe some of the family community planning, community HIV/AIDS education does, but I think there's a lot to learn from how they're marketing and how they're appealing to adolescent girls. I think Jenny's example, you know, the packaging and social marketing of weekly iron folic acid supplements is a good one. I recently saw an interesting project funded by Grand Challenges Canada, which was feminine hygiene projects or MaxiPad, you know, and how those are being used by adolescent girls, and how that, you know, just interesting creative channels that people are already reaching these girls with products. And cosmetics was another example from Asia, and just different opportunities, because we know that anemia is affecting all kind of income quintiles. So just looking for different strategies to reach different segments of the market. I think there's a lot to learn from the promotion that's out there.
Any additional comments from the panel?
Okay, just quickly, I mean, the example of the private sector with the breastfeeding in the workplace is one thing, but as we say, you know, it's for, not just for, I mean, it is very key for support for breastfeeding, but for women's nutrition. And in spite of the fact that, you know, there's law for not having you know, children working in factory, we still have countries also where you have adolescents that are working in those factories. So at least if they can be a support for them and having even some, you know, sports activities around that. And the mobile technology, more and more adolescent teenagers get access to phone. And I think we could be creative in thinking more like those messages around, did you run today? Did you take I don't know, just did you kick a ball today? Just having being a bit more creative around what can be done around messaging using also mobile technology.
Maybe just to add, I think that the private sector are good at selling pretty much anything. And if we could get, frankly, whether you need it or not, they're great at creating demand. They tell us that we absolutely have to have the latest cell phone. And so if we could get either from their corporate social responsibility side or from their own capacity to think about what the business market is for them, for their fortified products, for their healthier products, there's definitely a great role that they could play. But we also know that they reach the last corner of every community. I used to mountain bike in Guatemala, and the one thing I could count on when I went into the most remote communities on my bicycle that you could hardly get to any other way was that there would be Coca-Cola. And why aren't we getting the things that we need in those communities on those trucks? And there's a huge area of potential collaboration and public-private partnerships of using the network, the supply chain, their capacity on never missing 1 inch of the country for the nutritious products and services that aren't reaching those communities.
Thank you very much. We've come to time, and so invite you to join us tomorrow, where we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into the interactions of nutrition and physical activity. We've got a great lineup, and Director of External Relations for Micronutrient Initiative, Christendes, will be moderating that session. So if you join me in a round of applause for our panelists.